Hello, and in this video I'm building a pedestrian and bicyclist's bridge. So to begin with, I started off with that key, trying to imagine if that would work as a sort of bridge, that the plan I had, but then it morphed into using pedestrian paths and trying to make a dual bridge. Obviously, one side's for pedestrians, the other side is for bikes, cyclists, and so forth. So I started off with this, using this covered bridge and this just plain bike road. It didn't really work out too well. It looks a bit strange in my opinion, but I do end up using the general shape to of the bridge here. As you can see, it looks very similar to the finished bridge, except I obviously used a asset that I used procedural objects on to make it fit correctly. So the general idea behind this build was to do more with pedestrians and cyclists, because my last video was just a standard pedestrian bridge. It didn't have a separate cycle lane. It wasn't really made for cyclists and pedestrians to both share. So with this one, I tried to make it so that they could both use the same bridge but be separated, basically. Which I feel like I did. There is a couple of things that are weird and just look strange, but it's just how things evolved and progressed through me building this. So as you can see here, I'm getting the general layout of how I want the roads to be, and then I used the Move It tool and the Level tool, highlighted all the nodes and made the bridge perfectly level, which is very useful to do. You just highlight all the nodes that you want to level, click the Level tool on Move It, and then click on the node that you want them all to be, and it will level it out perfectly. It's very, very useful. It's been a feature for a while, I just haven't really used it. So here I am tweaking, trying to see which cycle path I want to use. And I just ended up using the normal cycle path, because the ones that I maybe considered using, they are very glitchy at times and they don't really work as intended, which sort of sucks. The smaller a path gets, the more glitchy it can be, and on loading of said game, the paths do some very, very strange things. So here we go, we skip forward and I've added the procedural objects bridge. Now what I'm doing is using Move It to move the bridge to the desired location within. Like the bridge, the bridge deck, I've moved it into the position of the where I want it. Now, this did leave issues with the supports being in the way of pedestrians and cyclists, like riding. But let's just forget about that. I maybe could have tweaked it with procedural objects, moved the node, like the nodes that control those pillars over, but I gave it a quick go and it wasn't really worth trying to spend upwards of 20 minutes moving these nodes just to get them slightly off the path. If this was a real bridge, maybe I should have done the cyclist path on the other side and the pedestrian path on the lower side. It probably would have made more sense, but I'd already gone through most of the build and I wasn't going to change it, because having to change over the paths, I'd already placed a lot of different things, and that would just mess with the actual how the paths work, basically. So on the bridge, I added a small grass area. I was originally thinking maybe I should add some plants here or some like some foliage, but in the end I just stuck with grass. It fit nicely. It looked quite like a contrast between just normal bridges being completely paved. I imagine this is just a turf. It could even be AstroTurf. It's turf just put on top of the bridge to make it look more nice. You can stop there, have a break, have a picnic or something. Maybe? I don't know. And obviously, I haven't even said, but I've used decals on the paths themselves to give them this colour. The red one is the bike lane, and the cobbled one is where the pedestrians walk. And for the bike lane, on the slopes and where it enters the pedestrian and cycle shared area, I've added white lines, which I imagine it warns you that there is either a slope or like different circumstances up ahead, basically. So as you know, pedestrian paths have the side barrier on them. Now I didn't really want the barrier, it sort of didn't fit the theme of the bridge. So before I turned the paths invisible, I used these curves here just to separate the two lanes from one another, and I obviously use Move It and draw out the curves with the prop line tool and then put them in with Move It. But this is a slope, so what I did here is place one down, copy it, and then underneath I would add several layers till it would eventually touch the bottom of the deck. Now this did leave a bit of a strange like jump up effect, so what I ended up doing was just removing a couple and making it stepped. What you could do is perhaps use procedural objects and tilt the curve so it fit better, but the staired idea also works very well. So here I am turning the path invisible by using the invisible pedestrian paths. The only problem is the decals do not sit on top of invisible paths. So what I had to do was to make a slopes part for the slope to fit on, so that is why in the video beforehand, the cinematics, you would have seen it disappearing at points, because as soon as you move out of the viewpoint of the original part of the procedural object, it goes and it unrenders. So that's why a part of the bridge went invisible, because I had a ploppable asphalt procedural object under to make the slope correctly, and for the flat span I just used normal ploppable asphalt, and it worked out quite well. Obviously if you do this, you have to make sure that the height is correct with the paths, so you can't have them obviously the people with their feet in the ground or hovering slightly above the ground. This is easy enough, where you just select the nodes and you watch where the people are walking and you move it up and down and try and get it correct, basically. So here I am lining up just the bike lane with the ploppable asphalt. You can see it underneath there. It's actually ploppable pavement. Here I am actually doing what I said before with the procedural objects. So I'm stretching out the node as far as I can take it without it being really too far and then having the bridge completely disappear, unless you're looking at the exact point of the node. I think in the end I used 3 procedural object slabs just to cover the whole bridge basically. So for one side of the bridge I felt that the spanse it didn't really make sense having this big overhang. So what I ended up using is another part of the actual bridge that I originally used and just adding it underneath and giving it this sort of curved feel, which actually looked quite nice. And then I simply used the curbs that I had used on the rest of the bridge to fill in the gaps between the procedural object and the original wall that was above it. But it also left this weird end bit that I didn't really like. It didn't really fit. So what I ended up doing is using a longer curb, turning it into a procedural object, pulling it out and then making it slowly raise until it touched with the wall, so it was more of a gentle slope till the end. And this looked quite nice. It could have maybe been done on the other side if the other side was more further away, but I added a small shared bike and pedestrian plaza sort of thing, so it wouldn't really be necessary. I also felt that either sides of the bridge were a bit plain, and maybe if this bridge was built in real life they would have more of an emphasis on like designing the whole area around it. So I added these concrete, sort of like imagine them as planters. In real life they would be filled with dirt and have plants, have grass on them, just to add interesting. It's I don't know, it's okay. They look a bit strange. They do fit the sort of modernist style of the bridge, I suppose, which is probably why I added them. They're simply just Lost Gecko's retaining walls, which I then move into place with Move It, and then add ploppable grass on top. So that's pretty much it for this video. I do the foliage work in the next couple minutes, and you see a bit more of the finished plaza design, and then a bit of cinematics at the end. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.